The sledgehammer connected with the pool's concrete edge with a thunderous crack that echoed through the neighborhood like a gunshot. Sarah Mitchell wiped sweat from her brow, unaware that across the street, Karen Whitmore was already dialing 911 with trembling fingers. "There's a woman destroying property with a weapon." Karen hissed into the phone, her voice dripping with vindictive satisfaction. What Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that buried beneath that pool lay a secret that would turn their quiet suburban street into a battlefield, and before the sun set, one of them would be in handcuffs. But it wouldn't be who you think. The morning sun cast long shadows across Maple Street as Sarah Mitchell stood in her backyard, staring at the above-ground pool that had dominated the space for the past 3 years. The blue vinyl liner was cracked and faded, the metal frame rusted at the joints, and the whole structure looked like a monument to better times when her marriage was intact and her teenage daughter actually wanted to spend time at home. "Mom, you sure about this?" 17-year-old Emma emerged from the sliding glass door, her dark hair still messy from sleep. She wore an oversized t-shirt that had belonged to her father, though she'd never admit it. Sarah hefted the sledgehammer she'd rented from the hardware store. "Dead sure. This eyesore has been collecting mosquitoes and bad memories for 2 years. Time to reclaim our yard." Emma crossed her arms, studying her mother's face. Since the divorce, Sarah had thrown herself into home improvement projects with an almost manic energy. The kitchen renovation, the fence repair, the garden overhaul project seemed to be her way of erasing traces of her ex-husband David from their lives. "Dad helped put this up," Emma said quietly. Sarah's grip tightened on the hammers. "Handwell? Yeah. Well, your dad helped with a lot of things. Doesn't mean we have to keep them around forever." The first swing came down harder than necessary, sending a metallic clang across the neighborhood. Sarah had drained the pool the week before, and now the empty shell sat like a crater in the ground, its bottom littered with dead leaves and debris. From across the street, she could see a curtain twitch in the Whitmore house. Karen was watching, of course. The woman seemed to have a sixth sense for neighborhood drama, and Sarah's divorce had provided months of entertainment for her. Swing. Another clang. The rhythm felt good, therapeutic even. Each strike loosened something in Sarah's chest that had been wound tight for months. "Sarah Mitchell, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" The voice cut through the morning air like a blade. Sarah looked up to see Karen Whitmore marching across the street, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the sunlight. At 50, Karen maintained the kind of appearance that suggested she'd never had to choose between groceries and the electric bill. Her white capri pants and pink polo shirt looked like they'd been pressed that morning, despite the early hour. "Good morning, Karen," Sarah said, not pausing in her work. "I'm taking down my pool without a permit." Karen planted herself at the edge of Sarah's driveway, hands on her hips. "There are regulations about this sort of thing. Environmental concerns, noise ordinances." Sarah straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "It's my property, Karen, and it's 8 in the morning on a Saturday. I'm well within my rights." "Rights?" Karen's voice pitched higher. "What about my rights? What about the rights of everyone on this street who has to listen to this racket? Some of us are trying to enjoy a peaceful morning." Emma stepped closer. To her mother, sensing the tension, she'd witnessed enough of Karen's confrontations to know they rarely ended well. The woman had a talent for escalating situations, for finding the exact pressure point that would make someone snap. "I'll be done by noon," Sarah said, her voice carefully controlled. "Sorry for any inconvenience." "Sorry," Karen laughed, sharp sound that made Emma wince. "Do you know what that pool has done to my property values? An above-ground pool in this neighborhood. It's been an eyesore for years. The least you could do is handle its removal properly." The hammer felt heavy. In Sarah's hands, she'd been dreading this confrontation, knowing it was inevitable. Karen had made her feelings about the pool clear from the day it went up, circulating a petition among the neighbors and even attempting to get the HOA involved despite the fact that their street wasn't part of any homeowners association. "Like I said, I'll have it done by noon." Sarah turned back to her work, bringing the hammer down with renewed force. "Don't you turn your back on me, Sarah Mitchell." The shout was loud enough to echo off the houses, and Sarah saw Mrs. Chen peek out from her front door to houses down. "Mom," Emma whispered, "maybe we should know." Sarah's voice was firm. "We're not stopping because Karen doesn't like the noise. This is our home, and we're improving it. Karen's face flushed red. Improving it? You call this chaos improvement? You've been nothing but trouble since that husband of yours finally came to his senses and left. The words hit like a physical blow. Emma gasped, and Sarah felt the familiar burn of humiliation rise in her throat. It was one thing for Karen to complain about noise or property values, but bringing up the divorce crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. That's enough, Sarah said, her voice deadly quiet. Is it because I'm just getting started? Karen stepped closer, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant she was about to go for the kill. Do you know what David told my husband about why he really left? About what he found in your eye? Said, that's enough. Sarah's voice cracked like a whip, and she raised the sledgehammer slightly. Not threatening exactly, but the gesture was unmistakable. Karen's eyes widened, and she took a step back. Did you see that? She called out, looking around for witnesses. She threatened me. She raised a weapon at me. I did no such thing, Sarah said, but her heart was pounding. She looked around and saw that several neighbors had emerged from their houses. Drawn by the commotion, Mr. Patterson from next door stood on his porch, coffee mug in hand. The teenage boy from the corner house was filming with his phone. You're all witnesses, Karen announced dramatically. Sarah Mitchell just threatened me with a sledgehammer. This woman is dangerous. Karen, stop, Sarah pleaded. You know, that's not what happened. But Karen was already pulling out her phone, her fingers flying over the screen. I'm calling the police. This has gone too far. You can't just destroy property and threaten your neighbors. It's my property, Sarah shouted, her composure finally cracking. My pool, my yard, my life. You don't get to control everything that happens on this street. We'll see about that, Karen said, lifting the phone to her ear. 911. Yes, I need to report a domestic disturbance. A woman is destroying property with a sledgehammer and making threats. ... Emma grabbed her mother's arm. Mom, maybe we should go inside, but Sarah couldn't move. She stood frozen, watching Karen pace back and forth on the sidewalk, gesticulating wildly as she spoke to the emergency dispatcher. The neighbors were all staring now, some whispering among themselves. Mrs. Chen had her own phone out, probably recording. ... Yes, she's still armed, Karen was saying. I feel very threatened. This whole situation feels dangerous. The word armed sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She looked down at the tool in her hands. Suddenly, it didn't look like home improvement equipment anymore. Through Karen's lens, through the lens of a 911 dispatcher, it looked like a weapon. I need to put this down, she whispered to Emma. No, Mom, don't. You weren't doing anything wrong. But Sarah was already setting the sledgehammer aside, her hands shaking. The morning had started with such promise, a simple home improvement project, a chance to move forward to build something better from the wreckage of her old life. Now she felt like she was drowning in the wreckage instead. Karen finished her call and turned back to Sarah with a satisfied smile. They're sending a unit right now. We'll see how much you like making threats when you're explaining yourself to the police. I never threatened you, Sarah said, but her voice sounded weak, even to her own ears. That's not how it looked to me, or to anyone else who was watching. Karen gestured to the gathered neighbors. Isn't that right, everyone? Didn't you see her raise that hammer at me? The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah looked around. At faces she'd known for years, people she'd brought casseroles to when they were sick, neighbors whose packages she'd accepted when they were out of town. None of them met her eyes. Finally, Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. I saw you two arguing, he said carefully, but I couldn't really tell what happened from where I was standing. It wasn't much, but it was something. Sarah felt a flicker of gratitude toward the old man. Well, I saw everything, Karen announced, and I have it all documented. Timestamps, witness statements, the whole thing. Emma stepped forward, her young face fierce with indignation. You're lying, my mom. Didn't threaten anyone. She was just trying to improve our yard, and you came over here looking for a fight. Oh, sweetheart. Karen's voice dripped with false sympathy. I know you want to protect your mother, but defending someone who's clearly having some kind of breakdown isn't helping anyone. Breakdown. Sarah felt something snap inside her chest. You think I'm... Officer Marcus Rodriguez had been on the force for 12 years, and he'd learned to read situations quickly. The blonde woman in the polo shirt was talking rapidly, her hands gesturing dramatically as she painted a picture of neighborhood terror and threats of violence. But something about her performance, and it was a performance, made his instincts prickle. "She came at me with that sledgehammer," Karen was saying, pointing toward the tool that now lay abandoned on the grass. "I feared for my life. You can ask anyone who was here. They all saw it." Rodriguez looked around at the small crowd of neighbors that had gathered. Most of them looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. That was usually a sign that the story being told wasn't quite matching what they'd witnessed. His partner, Officer Janet Chen, was already talking to Sarah Mitchell, who stood with her teenage daughter near the back porch. The woman looked exhausted, rather than violent dark circles under her eyes, shoulders slumped with the weight of someone who'd been fighting battles on multiple fronts. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said to Karen, "I need you to slow down and tell me exactly what happened, step by step." Karen's eyes lit up with the fervor of someone who'd been waiting her whole life for this moment of vindication. "I was enjoying a peaceful morning when this woman started attacking her pool with a sledgehammer. The noise was unbearable. When I came over to reasonably discuss the situation, she became belligerent and hostile." "Belligerent how?" "Screaming, cursing, making threats, and then she raised that weapon at me." Karen's voice trembled with what she probably thought was believable fear. "I honestly thought she was going to attack me." Rodriguez made notes, his expression neutral. "Anyone else see this alleged threat?" Karen gestured toward the neighbors. "Everyone saw it. Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Chun, the Morrison boy, was even filming it." Rodriguez looked toward the teenager Karen had indicated, but the kid had disappeared. "Convenient." "Officer Rodriguez," Janet Chen approached, her expression thoughtful. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" They stepped aside, out of Karen's hearing range. "What's your read?" Rodriguez asked quietly. The daughter's story matches the mother's. Simple home improvement project that got out of hand when the neighbor came over looking for a fight. No threats made, no weapon raised. The mom seems genuinely confused about why the police were called. Rodriguez glanced back at Karen, who was now talking to Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down, apparently trying to recruit more witnesses, and the complainant has a history with these people. According to Sarah Mitchell, this woman has been harassing them since the divorce, trying to get the HOA involved, circulating petitions. There's bad blood here. Any previous calls to this address? None. Clean record for Sarah Mitchell, but Karen Whitmore, ... double quotes, Chen consulted her notes. 3 noise complaints filed in the past year, all against different neighbors. 1 harassment complaint that was dropped. 2 calls about suspicious activity that turned out to be nothing. Rodriguez sides. Every neighborhood had the person who saw themselves as the unofficial sheriff, the keeper of property values and social order, usually harmless, but sometimes they escalated situations that could have been resolved with a simple conversation. "Let me talk to some of these witnesses," he said. Rodriguez approached Mr. Patterson first. The elderly man was still holding his coffee mug, watching the proceedings with the resigned expression of someone who'd seen too much neighborhood drama over the years. "Sir, I'm Officer Rodriguez. I understand you witnessed the altercation between Ms. Mitchell and Ms. Whitmore." Patterson nodded slowly. "I heard arguing, came out to see what was happening. The Mitchell woman was working on her pool. The Whitmore woman was upset about the noise." "Did you see Ms. Mitchell make any threatening gestures?" The old man was quiet for a moment, considering. "I saw her holding the sledgehammer. Can't say I saw her threaten anyone with it, but Karen was pretty worked up, making a lot of accusations." "What kind of accusations?" "Personal stuff. About the divorce, about Sarah's character, the kind of things you say when you want to hurt someone." Patterson's weathered face showed disapproval. "Wasn't right, if you ask me." Rodriguez made more notes. "Anything else you think I should know?" Patterson glanced toward Karen, who was still holding court with a small group of neighbors. "Karen Whitmore has been trying to run that family out of the neighborhood since the husband left. This isn't the first time she stirred up trouble for them." Before Rodriguez could ask for more details, he noticed a man approaching from the house directly behind Sarah's property. Elderly, walking with a slight limp, carrying what looked like a video camera. "Excuse me, officers," the man called out. "I'm Harold Henderson. I live at 847 Oak Street, right behind this property. I think I might have something you'd want to see." Karen's voice immediately cut through the morning air. "Mr. Henderson, thank goodness. You must have seen the whole thing from your yard." Henderson stopped in front of Rodriguez, ignoring Karen completely. "I was filming the cardinals that nest in my oak tree. I do it every morning. It's a hobby of mine. Nature photography." He held up the camera, started recording about 10 minutes before the argument began. Rodriguez felt his pulse quicken. Video evidence could cut through all the conflicting stories and emotional manipulation. "Would you be willing to show us what you recorded?" "Absolutely." Henderson's eyes met Sarah's across the yard, and Rodriguez caught the slight nod that passed between them. "I think everyone should see exactly what happened here." Karen's face had gone pale. "Now, wait just a minute. What kind of camera is that? Is it even legal to record people without their consent? This feels like a violation of privacy." "I was on my own property, filming wildlife," Henderson said calmly. "The fact that you happen to be creating a public disturbance in my camera's field of view is incidental." Rodriguez suppressed a smile. He liked this old man already. "Let's take a look," he said. Henderson led them to his back porch, which had a clear view of Sarah's backyard. He connected the camera to a small tablet, and within moments, the morning's events began to play out on the screen. The video quality was surprisingly good. Henderson had invested in professional equipment, and every detail was crystal clear. They watched Sarah working methodically on the pool, her daughter nearby offering occasional comments. The sound of the sledgehammer was loud, but not excessive, and the timestamp showed it was well after 8 in the morning. Then Karen appeared. Marching across the street with the determined stride of someone spoiling for a fight. "Turn up the volume," Rodriguez requested. Henderson adjusted the settings, and suddenly they could hear every word of the confrontation. Karen's initial complaints about noise and permits, Sarah's polite responses, the escalation. As Karen became more aggressive and personal there, Henderson said, pointing to the screen, "This is where it gets interesting." They watched Karen deliver her cutting remarks about the divorce, about David leaving Sarah. They saw Sarah's face crumple with pain and humiliation. They heard Karen's cruel laughter. And then they saw Sarah raise the sledgehammer knot at Karen. But to resume her work on the pool, the gesture was clearly defensive, a way to signal that the conversation was over and she was returning to her project. She never threatened anyone. Officer Chen murmured. "Keep watching," Henderson said. Grimly, the video continued, showing Karen becoming increasingly agitated as she realized Sarah wasn't going to engage further. They watched her pull out her phone, saw her deliberate escalation as she called 911. But the most damning moment came near. The end, when Karen thought no one was listening. She was pacing on the sidewalk, and the camera picked up her voice clearly. ... "Yes, she's still armed. A large sledgehammer. I feel very threatened." Then, thinking she was out of earshot, she turned to Mrs. Chen and said, "This will teach her to mess with me. Let's see how tough she feels when she's explaining herself down at the station." Rodriguez and Chen exchanged looks. Filing a false police report was a crime. Using emergency services to settle personal vendettas was a crime, and they had it. All on video. Mr. Henderson, Rodriguez said, "We're going to need a copy of this recording." "Already copied to a USB drive," Henderson replied, producing a small flash drive from his pocket. "Figured you might need it." Rodriguez took the drive and walked back toward the main group. Karen was still talking animatedly to anyone who would listen, apparently unaware that her version of events had just been thoroughly debunked. "Ms. Whitmore," Rodriguez called out. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Karen approached with confidence, clearly expecting vindication. "Of course, officer. I hope you've gotten everything sorted out. This kind of violence can't be tolerated in a neighborhood like ours." "About that," Rodriguez said carefully, "we've reviewed video evidence of the incident, and I'm afraid your account doesn't match what actually happened." The color drained from Karen's face. "Video evidence? What video evidence?" Mr. Henderson was filming from his backyard. "We have a clear record of the entire altercation." Rodriguez's voice remained professional, but there was steel underneath, "including your 911 call." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's not. He can't just record people without permission. Actually, he can, when he's on his own pee. David Mitchell answered on the third ring, his voice carrying that careful neutrality he'd perfected since the divorce. "Sarah, is everything okay?" You never call unless, what did you tell Robert Whitmore? Sarah cut him off, her voice sharp. With adrenaline from the morning's events, the silence that followed stretched long enough that Sarah checked her phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. When David finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Jesus, Sarah, what happened? Did Karen? Karen just got arrested for filing a false police report against me. But before they cuffed her, she made some comment about what you told her husband, about what you found that made you leave. Sarah paced across her backyard, the sledgehammer forgotten for the moment. I need to know what you told him, David, because if Karen knows, it won't stay secret much longer. Emma watched her mother from the porch steps, her expression troubled. She'd heard enough one-sided phone conversations during the divorce, too. Recognized the tone the way her mother's voice got when she was trying to extract information from her father. Information he didn't want to give. Can we not do this over the phone? David asked. Some conversations need to happen in person. No, Sarah's voice was firm. I just had the police called on me in my own backyard. My daughter watched me get accused of assault. So tell me now. Another long pause. In the background, Sarah could hear the sounds of David's new Lifa television, perhaps his girlfriend making breakfast. I found the lockbox, David said finally. Sarah's blood turned to ice. What? Lockbox? Don't play dumb, Sarah. The metal lockbox buried under the pool liner. The one with David's voice caught, with all the cash and the fake IDs. And the... Sarah had gone rigid, her face pale as paper. I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah whispered, but even she could hear how unconvincing it sounded. Really? Because when I found it 2 years ago, when I was trying to fix that leak in the liner, I confronted you about it. Remember? That fight we had right before I moved out. When you told me it was none of my business, and that some things were better left buried. About growing apart. But David had found the box. Had seen everything inside. You never understood what my life was like before I met you. Enlighten me then, because I've spent 2 years wondering if I was married to someone I never really knew. 2 years wondering if our whole life together was built on lies. Emma took a step closer, her young face creased with worry. Mom, what's going on? Sarah held up a hand, signaling for Emma to wait. But how do you explain to your 17-year-old daughter that her mother had secrets that predated her existence? That the woman who packed her lunches and helped with homework had once been someone else entirely? The money was mine, Sarah said into the phone. Legally mine, from before we met. $50,000 in cash doesn't just materialize legally. Sarah, neither do fake driver's licenses with your picture and different names. It's complicated. Then uncomplicated because I've been carrying this secret for 2 years, and apparently I'm not the only one who knows about it anymore. Robert Whitmore has been asking me questions about your past, about where you came from, about why you never wanted to travel or take vacations anywhere that required showing ID. Sarah closed her eyes. Feeling the weight of decades-old decisions pressing down on her, she'd thought that part of her life was buried forever, sealed away under vinyl and water and the ordinary rhythms of suburban motherhood. But the past had a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you thought you'd buried it. Mom, Emma's voice was more insistent now. What fake IDs? What money? Sarah looked at her daughter, this beautiful, innocent girl, who'd grown up believing her mother was just another suburban mom with a mundane past. That sometimes the only way to build a good life is to leave a bad one so far behind that it feels like it happened to someone else. I have to go, Sarah said into the phone. Sarah, wait. She hung up and stood facing Emma, who was staring at her with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. What fake IDs? Emma repeated. Sarah sank down onto the porch steps beside her daughter, suddenly feeling every one of her 43 years. Baby, there are things about my life before you were born that I've never told you, the kind that are hard to explain and harder to understand. Sarah took Emma's hand, surprised by how cold her own fingers were. I was someone else, literally. I had a different name, a different life. Nothing that dramatic. I was just ... running from mistakes, from a life that wasn't working, from people who weren't good for me. What people? David's name flashed on the screen, but she declined the call. Almost immediately, a text message appeared. Robert Whitmore called me this morning. What? If they already know, if Robert Whitmore was asking questions, if Karen had been suspicious enough to have her husband make inquiries, Then they'd been watching her more closely than she'd realized. "Mom, you're scaring me," Emma said. Sarah looked up to see genuine fear in her daughter's eyes. Never had to reinvent herself. Never had to choose between the truth and safety. "The money David found," Sarah said slowly. "It was mine. A way to start over if I ever needed to disappear again." Disappear. From what? Sarah stood up, her mind racing. If the Whitmores were already suspicious, if they'd been watching her and asking questions, then dismantling the pool wasn't just home improvement anymore, in their eyes. "From my ex-boyfriend," Sarah said finally. "A man named Marcus Reeves, a very dangerous man who I lived with for 3 years before I met your father. A man who would probably still be looking for me if he knew where I was." Emma's face went white. "Looking for you? Why?" Sarah closed her eyes. "Because when I left him, I took something that belonged to him, something worth a lot of money." "What did you take?" "Not David's familiar sedan, but a black SUV with tinted windows." Sarah felt her stomach drop as 2 men in expensive suits got out, their movements precise and professional. Emma grabbed her mother's arm. "Mom, who are those men?" She recognized the type, if not the specific individuals, clean-cut, well-dressed, the kind of men who asked polite questions in quiet voices and expected honest answers, the kind of men who worked for people like Marcus Reeves. "Go inside," Sarah whispered to Emma. "Right now. Go to your room and lock the door. I'm not leaving you, Emma. Please, trust me. Go inside and call 911 if anything happens." To me, the 2 men approached with the casual confidence of people accustomed to getting their way. The taller one, with silver at his temples and kind eyes that didn't match his profession, spoke first. "Ms. Mitchell, or should I say, Ms. Sarah Chen." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We'd like to have a conversation with you about some property that went missing from Atlanta about 20 years ago." Sarah's legs almost gave out. They knew her real name, the name she'd abandoned when she fled. "I think you have me confused with someone else," Sarah managed. "I don't think so," the second man said. He was younger, with a kind of build that suggested he spent serious time in the gym. "We have photographs, documentation, and we have a very patient employer who's been looking for you for a very long time." Emma appeared in the doorway behind them, holding her phone. "Mom, should I call the police?" The silver-haired man turned toward Emma with that same cold smile. "That won't be necessary, sweetheart. We're just here to have a friendly conversation with your mother about returning some property that doesn't belong to her, because you're trespassing on my property, and this convy